What you are about to hear will blow your mind and give you six-pack abs without even exercising.
Pull up a bar stool and relax.
Hey, who wants to have some fun?
You've made it to Happy Hour with John Gaskins.
Oh, no. Not again.
Get ready for entertaining local and regional sports talk that will change your life. Or not.
And by the way, when you're telling these little stories, here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Here's your host, John Gaskins.
Here's Johnny. Hello! Ah!
I'm back, baby! I'm back!
All right, it is a Monday, one of the most pleasant days of the year outside here at Sioux Falls. For those of you consuming this 2 days from now, 2 weeks, 2 millennia from now, it's a wretched 97 degree, 106 degree index day. Who cares? Because
milk was a bad choice.
That's why we have beer and we get to drink it today. One of my best friends in Sioux Falls and in South Dakota, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. You can't have a discussion about the best play-by-play announcers in this state without this man in the conversation, because he's been at it for a while now. And you've done a lot.
Yeah.
South Dakota State women, Sioux Falls Canaries, Sioux Falls Storm, and for we can say over 15 years, South Dakota State basketball tournaments for SDPB.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, all these fun things that I've gotten to do.
Yeah.
But get to do it in my own backyard. It's pretty cool.
It's not amazing.
Yeah.
You've earned it. You're pretty good at what you do. By the way, he is J.J. Hartigan, the current voice of the Augustana Vikings, football and basketball, radio and TV. You've been with Augie mostly in a TV role, but for at least one season, now 2, in the radio role, and you're back this year. So
yeah,
congratulations.
Yeah, it's crazy how it starts as a tape-delayed video stream type of deal, and now it's evolved with streaming and everything else that's gone on, and getting an opportunity to do radio with Augie is great too. But they've welcomed me in with open arms, and it's really felt like home since the day I've gotten there, and it's still a fun job. So, we could just bull right into it, because we lost Jeff Fylling, who will forever be known as the voice of the Vikings. This past spring, and of course we had Jeff on our show about a year ago. He had popped up and it appeared had beaten cancer, and then it just attacked him all of a sudden. Bing, in about a week's span, we lost him. And it's an interesting position for you, because, again, we've had new technology that has allowed 2 guys to do Augustana games. Jeff was always the radio guy, and they had you at least for home games, football, basketball. Any other sports? I do a little baseball.
A little baseball?
Yeah.
Okay. But so JJ's been on Augustana calls for a long time, but then he took over Jeff's spot when Jeff was ill and battling cancer a couple of years ago. And now you're the guy again. And that has to be interesting for you, because it's a job that a lot of people would love to have, but not under those circumstances.
Yeah, you never want it to be under these circumstances, obviously, and to lose Jeff was such an integral part of not only the Augustana community, but the sports community in South Dakota as a whole. He was a part of all of the Sanford events that would go on, bringing legends in. He would court a lot of those players to come play golf, and then through that turned into relationships with the hospital system and things like that. But you never want to take over a position because somebody gets sick, somebody gets injured, whatever, passes away. It's such a huge shoe to fill, and you can't ever live up to their standard, because he was the voice of Augustana athletics for 40 years. Anybody who went to that campus, anybody who played for Augustana got to know Jeff, and he was a friend to just about everybody. And if you ever passed him in the hallway and said, "Hey Jeff, how you doing?" his answer was almost always, "It's the best day of my life." And At first, I thought he was kind of, just tongue-in-cheek, kind of saying that just to get by.
Sometimes you couldn't tell with Jeff. He's one of those dry-witted guys who, are you being sarcastic or not? Everybody loves to say, living the dream, and when we say that, we're usually being sarcastic.
Right.
But anyway.
I think Jeff truly meant it, though.
Yeah.
I think every single day was the best day of his life, and he lived it to the fullest. And to see him get to come back and do Augustana football this last year on the radio again, to see the glow that he had when he was in that press box, it's something that I'll remember forever, just to see him reach that point, getting through all of his chemotherapy and getting through everything that he had gone through. To earn that right to get back into the press box was pretty cool. And he's still the only guy, aside from Mike Hendrickson, that I've seen smoke a cigarette openly in a press box or anything like that. But I think he's earned that too over the years, to be grandfathered into some of those rules and stuff. But those are the little things that I'll definitely miss about Jeff later on. Maybe not the smell of the cigarettes, but it was always one of those unique things. You could always know where he was when he was in the press box for a variety of reasons. So.
How is he? It sounds like you've given us a glimpse, but how is he with you? For one, when you're coming in and you're working the TV side of things, the streaming side of things, he's doing the radio. But certainly when he was unable to do either, and you were kind of in the role of taking over for him for a bit.
I mean, I have mentors everywhere around South Dakota, right? He's not just another in a long line of guys that were basically lining up to help me along the way as a young broadcaster. I think that's the really beautiful thing about being in South Dakota. You may not get that anywhere else, but there are people who will, if you just make a phone call, you reach out to them, say, hey, listen to my audio tape, tell me what I can come up with. They're going to be there to help you out. They're going to give you advice. It's a brotherhood that I think is very different from other communities, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to pick his brain and learn things, and he introduced me to people at Augustana that I probably would have never had a chance to meet otherwise. So just opening doors for me was pretty cool, and it's not always easy because I'm sure he felt footsteps on the backside, wondering if somebody's trying to take his job, which definitely wasn't the case. I didn't want his job. I wanted to be a part of Augustana, but it's just a different dynamic, kind of trying to break down some of those walls and barriers. But once we got to know each other, got to have an understanding of who we were and what our roles were going to be, our relationship was great.
By the way, you're hearing some exuberance behind us here at Gibbs Sports Bar on a Monday, where usually we're pretty safe in places like these at about 2 o'clock, especially on a Monday. When it comes to it being fairly quiet and a little dead at that time of day, between lunch and dinner and happy hour. But the World Cup's going on. It's the world's game. So, we have a bunch of guys behind us who they're not even here to watch one of their own countries play. They're watching Brazil and Japan because you don't have to explain it. It's Brazil and Japan playing soccer. So this, like other venues we've been doing shows from the last couple of weeks, I didn't know it until I walked in here today, but Gibbs is a place where people, why wouldn't you want to come watch a World Cup game here? You can see it if you're watching, or if you've been here, you understand that they know how to do it right here with TVs, very nice, vivid, giant TVs around the whole place. They got the sound of the game on because it's a real sports bar that plays sound of the games. So big thanks to Dan and all the folks at Gibbs on the east side of Sioux Falls, East 26th Street, the old Cherry Creek Bar. Also, this side of town kind of needed a few more restaurants and bars, and they got it within the last couple of years.
No, I think it's a great addition. I think it's perfect, and I'm just glad to find out that they're watching the World Cup and not Wimbledon. I'm a tennis guy, but I think I'll take the World Cup over that just about any day.
I don't know if they'd be packing it in for Wimbledon here, but it's on if you're a tennis guy and you want to watch it. The last question along the Fylling lines is this. He had such a distinctive style and personality. I mean, if you read any of the tributes, certainly if you attended the funeral, and I had a chance to talk to some people who knew him as well. I mean, clearly, like one of a kind. Just the personality, the dry wit, the one-liners, was a little bit more of a teddy bear than maybe he let off, all that kind of stuff. And a very distinctive style on the air, which I asked him about last time. And like you always knew, if you were blind and you were just turning the dial on a Saturday afternoon, you knew when you were hearing a Jeff Fylling call. Yep. Yours is different because everybody's is different from Jeff. And he's a beloved guy over there. I think as much for the person as is really good at it, but as much as the person as the guy who called the games. So how, if at all, have you processed that, or following a legend and all that kind of stuff, knowing you're not Jeff, and people should not expect you to be Jeff, and I don't think they'd want you to try to be Jeff.
No, not
How
at
have
all.
you tackled that, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting place to be in. I've had the unique opportunity of having to step into, I guess you could say, quote unquote, a legend's shoes more than once. When Steve Emming was leaving SDSU, I was the guy that got the call, and Tyler Merriam, of course, stepped into a more prominent role with the Jackrabbits. I went in and did the SDSU women's games for a few years. And then when the Sioux Falls Storm called, of course, Rich Rosti, the Silver Fox, he was a legend, and he's, I think, the only broadcaster in the Indoor Football League Hall of Fame. So that tells you everything you need to know about him right there. But it's impossible to be them. You can't emulate them. You can't become those people. So just try to be yourself. Just try to call a game that you would want to hear, that you would want to be a part of, while still hoping that you respect the people that came before you and try to live up to their standards as best you can.
Sure.
Not always an easy thing to do, but I would say that if you go into it with people surrounding you that give you encouragement, it makes it a lot easier. And again, I think that's where living in South Dakota helps a lot. There's people that want you to do well. There's people that are encouraging you, putting you in the right spot. And even if you do have to step into a role that's maybe bigger than you in the moment, you don't feel like it necessarily. So.
Cordell, are we okay on audio? Okay. We do not normally have this much excitement going on around us when we are doing our shows here around town. One thing you can always emulate without worrying about copying anybody is passion, energy, enthusiasm, pure joy for being able to do the job. You've always had that. You're a lifelong Sioux Falls guy. So I'm very curious, what made you want to do this? What made you want to do this for a living?
Yeah.
When did you really know this is what you wanted to do, and who, whether it be someone from around here or nationally, inspired you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I grew up just as a sports fan. So being around youth sports, being around this community that embraces sports so much, it's hard not to get excited about sports. So there was always the interest in the back of my mind of just, it'd be cool to have a job in sports as I get older, So thinking about that as I'm growing up. But my grandfather on my mom's side, he was a radio DJ back in the 60s and 70s. In fact, our family moved to Sioux Falls here. He worked at KXRB, a country radio station here in Sioux Falls, spun records, old country music, Willie Nelson, that kind of stuff.
Did he move here for the job?
Yep.
Wow.
And he's moved around everywhere from Aberdeen, Minneapolis to Sioux Falls, and he passed away when I was young, but I always heard stories about the things that he did, the people he interacted with, and the jobs that he had, and that always stuck with me, something that might be something I want to do, kind of carry on a family tradition, that kind of thing. So there's some family ties in there too, but my parents, they took us to sporting events all the time. We were at Skyforce games, had season tickets, went to Canaries games all the time. Really, the Skyforce is probably where I realized that that's what I wanted to do. Watching these people put on a show in front of, at the old arena, 5,000 fans on
I was going to say, you got a chance to be there when they were in the arena and they could fill the arena.
It was high caliber basketball. I mean, you had guys like Stacey King, who unfortunately just passed away, the Chicago Bulls legend. I got to see Manute Bol play against Daryl Dawkins. Some of the cooler things. I was there for the Victor Page game, which anybody who knows about that at Christmas pulled the fire alarms and kind of had a temper tantrum with a broom at one point and kind of ran crazy. But there was a lot of things there that I grew up being around, and even with all the crazy chaotic things that came with that, I was like, that seems like a life I'd like to have. So it was pretty cool to be involved in all that. And Craig Maddock, Mike Hendrickson, listening to their shows when I was younger, kind of solidified it for me. It's like, okay, if those guys can do it, I can do it. I would love to be a part of that, be a part of whatever they're doing, because they just seem like they're having fun. Every single day they go on the air. And for a guy who's 16, 17 years old, find a fun job that's not hard, that isn't going to be manual labor, doing something you love. Seems pretty good.
Not in an office all day, not having to file those TPS reports.
Cubicles and I would not get along.
Yeah, see, that's why I'm here.
Yep.
I was going to say what age you were listening to Craig and Mike, because I was kind of like, okay, because that's not exactly their demo.
No, not at all. I mean, I was driving home from high school.
I mean, and just to kind of shed light on myself. I'm 47. Matt Zimmer is 45. He and I were playing golf the other week, and some guy who's probably about 80 came up to us and just to say hi. Yeah. And Matt, as we drove away, Matt's kind of like, that's our audience right there.
Yep. You know your demographic.
And not that there's anything wrong with that. Hello to all of our 80-year-old fans.
Absolutely.
But because 20 years ago they were 60 and 30 years ago they were 50 or whatever. Yep. But you were very young. You were, because not a lot of people who are that age now, and probably maybe not even a lot of people that age then. Yeah. They might have liked sports, but they weren't listening to sports talk, let alone local Sioux Falls sports talk. So how did you fall into that?
Yeah, I mean, So I had a newspaper route when I was a little kid, and so I would put my headphones on when I was out slinging newspapers at 5 a.m. and kind of fell in love with the idea of listening to radio, whether it be the Bob and Tom comedy show or, listening to whatever Dan Patrick show was on or something like that. Just kind of started to fall into it. I didn't want to hear the same old songs playing on the radio every single day when I went out and did my job. So just finding a way to keep things unique, interesting. And then you start hearing these personalities. You start thinking, okay, they're fun. I want to know more about them, who they are. And the comedy side of things was probably one of the ones that more than anything was like, radio could be a fun job. You can find ways to be relevant in ways that aren't sports or news and things like that. And so, it was always very interesting to me.
What I liked about radio or this is you can try to be funny or entertaining, but you don't have an audience judging you. Right. You can bomb and you don't have to feel the...
or the eyes staring at you with no smile or laughter. Yeah, that's always tough. Man.
Yes. And most people, I think, consuming this know who Craig and Mike are, Craig Maddock and Mike Hendrickson, but I'm telling you, I see guys at the ballpark who are familiar with this show who are more toward you. How old are you? Do you mind saying?
Yeah, 37.
37, 30, more toward your age, a little younger, or somewhere around Cordell's age. He's 27, who are aware of this show and what's going on, but they Sioux Falls. There's a reason Sioux Falls has doubled in population in the last 30 or 40 years. There's new people coming in all the time. And so some people aren't familiar. So Sports Talk with Craig and Mike, it was like the first daily sports talk radio local show based out of Sioux Falls. They were a bit like Gary Weckworth, the former Canaries and Stampede owner. He was a sports talk show host in the 80s, but I think it was like once a week. Yeah. They were the first two guys to do it every day. And I wasn't even going to talk about them with you, but you gave me an opportunity just to give people who are kind of new an idea of, I guess, for lack of a better word, how big of a deal that show was for a while. And we're talking circa, they started in 2001, Mike left in 2006, a guy who was Rapid City's all-time sports broadcasting icon, Bob Laskowski, came in here at the end of his career, 06 to 08. I replaced Bob 08 to 11. Then there was Chris Tubbs from 11 to 16. I came back and replaced Chris until we were knocked out by the pandemic in 2020. But Craig was the common denominator, but people remember it most fondly from Mike's days because Mike was already a big name in town and still is. So that's a long way of setting it up and just how big of a deal that show was for a bit.
Absolutely. And on another note, I mean, for those two, Craig and Mike, I mean, beyond their show, all the state tournaments that they covered, high school football, basketball. I mean, they were in your home, whether it was on the radio or on TV, for just about every big sporting event. And even when I was in high school, they were going into the high schools and broadcasting the games live, like you do still to this day. I mean, they were as involved in local high school and college sports as anybody in the state of South Dakota.
Yeah, and not that they're not a big deal now, but they were probably a bigger deal then. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
100%.
I mean, you've lived here longer than I have, so you can tell me. But I think the Jackrabbits and the Coyotes have gotten to be a much bigger deal since they moved to Division I. Yes. Especially the Jacks, and they're able to fill a 19,000-seat football stadium now. That would have been laughable back then, 15 years ago. But when they were both again, tell me if you agree, more in Division II, like Augie and USF still are, it kind of made the high school, they weren't as big of a deal. So everybody just kind of had a piece of the pie here, and high school was a pretty big deal.
Oh, absolutely.
To it, right?
I mean, that was one of their bigger focal points at the time. Obviously, as you mentioned, there was a lot of Division II excitement going on, NAIA athletics, but I think high school athletics in the late 90s, early 2000s was probably at its peak as far as popularity. I mean, when we went to the state tournaments, student sections were packed to the brim. Kids would skip school and go to the games. Now, if there's no school at the state tournaments, most of those kids are probably sitting at home watching it or playing video games or whatever they're doing. But you just don't see that student following like there used to be. And I think there's still in small towns quite a bit of following with their community teams and things like that. But at least in Sioux Falls and in the bigger markets, you don't see that passion like it used to be. And they provided a lot of that on a daily basis, whether people wanted to know like what was going on after a Friday night game with a coach's show or whatever. Craig and Mike were there for it. I'm sure you loved those coaches shows, but the 9 a.m.
It was
on
a love
Saturday.
hate.
Yeah. But
didn't like the time of day that I had to wake up and do it, but I enjoyed talking to the coaches, and but that's a very micro example of how big of a deal it kind of was. I think that show at some point in time was like, for high school enthusiasts, of which there used to be more, was kind of a big show to hear the coaches talk about the game the next. So would you wake up and listen to that?
Ooh, not if I was waking up.
That's where you draw the line.
But the Saturday morning stuff was tough. Man. Especially if we did games on Friday night, not leaving Howard Wood until 10:30, 11 o'clock. That's a tough turnaround.
Yeah, sure. Oh, you're telling me. Yeah. But like you went to Lincoln High School. What were you much of an athlete? Did you play sports? Were you like me? You kind of knew like, I'm not an athlete to be good enough to make varsity on these teams, so I'm just going to get into sports in another way. Yeah. Or were you an athlete? Pretty much the way you went through it. I mean, I realized after sophomore year that I probably wasn't going to go very far in football, and so that hung up the shoulder pads after that. Played baseball through my junior year, and even then I was like, I don't see a future beyond this probably in high school, so what can I do? Yeah. Started falling in love with music and going to concerts and things like that, and so I kind of took a pivot. Rather than being the sports guy, I kind of turned into more of the hippie and that kind of thing. Nice. But, I mean, I had long hair, tie-dyed shirts, the hemp necklaces, the works, all that stuff. So I embraced that lifestyle fully, and still was a sports fan, but just kind of enjoyed being a fan, and played high-Y basketball all the way through, but nothing that was competitive by any means. So, guess what, JJ? All the music and hippie stuff. Yeah. I was that too in high school. You turn away from sports, and was Lincoln any good at the time in any of those sports? No, they were probably the least of all of the Sioux Falls schools at that time. And I mean, the coaching staff did well. The boys basketball team was good at that time. It seemed like every year Lyle Pearson or whoever was the coach after that had a team that was capable of making a state tournament or did make a state tournament every year. Aside from that, sports was not Lincoln's main objective, and we had 200 kids or whatever lining up to play trumpet for the band because they were going to the Macy's Day Parade or go to the Rose Bowl Parade, and so we were definitely a band school, and the band kids were the cool ones, but sports definitely changed right after our graduating class left, and my sister's senior class 2009 with that boys basketball team and everybody else that was there on that campus at the time. That's when Lincoln really kind of turned around. That's when I got to Sioux Falls. I got here in 2008 and called Lincoln winning a state football championship. I think that was their first ever. Aaron Beavers was the coach, and then they went right into a 25-0 basketball team. They were rocking and rolling. But it goes through ebbs and flows. By the way, back to Craig Maddock and Mike Hendrickson, I think they both got in trouble at some point in their careers for making snide comments after halftime of a Lincoln football game back in their leaner days, when all of a sudden more than half the crowd would thin out right after the band played. Isn't at halftime. Weird how that would work? Yeah. And of course, so did I. Once I came and I hopped on that. It still happens, but Lincoln's been far more competitive in football. More people do stay. Still quite a band there too, by the way. Of course, I mean, Lincoln's always been known, great academic school, incredible band, but arts in general. Oh yeah. And so, if I asked you this, it's been 15 years. Sure. I can't remember. Where did you go for your post-secondary education? So after I graduated in 2006, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Really, I had teachers who were trying to get me to go in and being an educator, working as a teacher. I kind of wanted to just take a year off and just see what the world looked like for a bit, so that's what I did. Okay. But I took a job in the Sioux Falls School District, working in the early childhood department, worked with kindergarten-age kids, helping them kind of develop, and just gave me an idea that, okay, teaching's probably not for me, at least at that age and at that time. I didn't want to do it. So that kind of changed things, and I reached out to my
video media teacher at Lincoln High School, actually, Bob Pritchard.
Okay.
And he had just taken a job at Iowa Lakes Community College as the media coordinator and teacher or professor down there in Okoboji. So I'm like, Okoboji College could be kind of fun, find myself at a lake every weekend. During the winter, they've got, the winter games, walk out on the ice. And
do they?
Have all kinds of frozen fun out there. So there was no shortage of fun in Okoboji at this 2-year school. And so I'm like, I'll do that, see what happens. We ended up setting up a live stream service for the basketball and volleyball teams at that time, where there were no other schools that had any sort of live streaming at that point in 2007. So it was kind of a test run just to see what we were capable of. Yeah. That turned into doing some play-by-play just to see if it would work. Yeah. And then I met the baseball coach down there at Iowa Lakes as well, and he was the manager of the Mankato Moondogs, which is where I got my first broadcasting gig. So I owe a lot to Iowa Lakes. It was just a 2-year school, and I thought I'd just go to get my gen eds out of the way kind of deal, but it ended up being a big part of the fabric of who I am. So.
And so the Moondogs were your first kind of post-college.
Yeah.
And this was, is this amateur wood bat, college amateur wood bat?
Yeah, so the Northwoods League is summer wood bat league, kind of like the Cape Cod League out on the East Coast. It's just younger players, freshmen, incoming freshmen or sophomores generally would go to the Northwoods League, and then you'd get the elite players or like juniors that would go out to the Cape Cod League and really show what they did before they entered the draft kind of thing. So this was a good place for me as a young broadcaster to kind of cut my teeth, get an idea of how to do games on a daily basis, that kind of deal. But that was a whole different brand of learning how to broadcast, because baseball is every day. And if you're doing that all summer long, all over Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, you get thrown into what minor league sports is like in a hurry. So.
You're in a league like what? Mankato, St. Cloud, Bemidji,
Duluth,
Winona, stuff like that.
Battle Creek, Michigan. I think they've even moved into
Wisconsin.
North Dakota now a little bit. But Bismarck, I think, has a team. But
I mean, do you have any young broadcaster funny stories of something that happened or something that happened to you that's particularly memorable in those early days?
Well, the Northwoods League was a beast. So, I mean, getting into Canada was always an interesting one. They had a team in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and so there'd be guys on our team that were from Australia, things like that. And so getting those guys across the border, telling them, hey, you can't take big pucks of chewing tobacco across the border because that's a trade in good thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, one guy tried to bring a whole sleeve of chewing tobacco back with him, and they stopped him at customs and said, not so much.
Wow.
So, there were just little things like that. But my first day as the Mankato Moondogs guy, they always brought in a former Twins legend or somebody from the Minnesota sports community to throw out the first pitch on the opening day game.
Okay.
Mudcat Grant was our guy the first day. And I'm shell-shocked. I'm a Twins fan. I knew who he was. I'm a new broadcaster. Luckily, they had me partnered with one of the local radio guys there, Mike Sullivan. We called him Sully. He did hockey in Mankato for Minnesota State for years. Okay. He's a really good guy. He drove the ship that night. I wasn't going to be the guy to ask Mudcat Grant a bunch of questions as a green, 19-year-old broadcaster. What did you think about playing back in the just weird questions that I would have had no business asking him kind of deal. So meeting a baseball legend my first day on the job was a little bit like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into kind of thing. But it was a good crash course, man. It taught me what I needed to do to be more professional. Watching a guy like Mike Sullivan go about his business and handle a game while sitting next to a baseball legend was pretty cool. Things like that. And gotten to interview a lot of people along those lines with baseball over the years after that, but that one has always stuck out to me just because it was literally thrown into the fire, feet first kind of thing, and trying to figure it out on the fly. So,
so I've actually never talked to you about this. You seem like you're a baseball first guy. This is a guy who, like our friend Matt Zimmer, you're wearing your Twins hat most of the summer. You're constantly, if you follow JJ on social media, commenting on the Twins. You're still engaged even when it feels like they're completely irrelevant, and a maddening team to watch every day, and at times a boring team to watch. But they just kind of barely keep their head above water. Slugged past the Rockies 2-1 yesterday. And this Moondogs thing in Mankato eventually led to the Sioux Falls Canaries for a few years. But is it? Have you always been kind of a baseball? Like, is that your first love?
I mean, as far as being a pure sports fan,
Yeah.
baseball is definitely going to be the one that I'm always going to love. It's going to be hard to convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
That, being a Twins fan is a good idea. I mean, I think my first baby picture was in a Twins onesie. I'll
Yes.
probably be buried in a Twins cap.
There you
that
go.
kind of thing. So
This come from your dad?
This comes from my whole family. They're all
Yeah.
big Minnesota fans, and my grandpa again. He was a
Yeah.
big Minnesota fan back in the Harmon Killebrew days and things like
Yeah.
that. And so it's always been a part of our family. And baseball will probably always be a job that I would love to have, but I don't necessarily think it was my best sport broadcasting. I think basketball probably has been my best sport. It's the most challenging because of how fast-paced it can be, filling in with stories. And if you have to do a basketball doubleheader, it's a different beast altogether, man. Trying to reset and try to do another game right after finishing up one and keeping that same energy for another 3 hours.
Well, dude,
it's not easy.
Well, that's I mean, and on radio, it's even more taxing because you've done a lot of TV work as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, was that your first gig in South Dakota? Were the SDPB things?
Yep.
You're calling state tournaments for SDPB. Now you're doing 4 games.
Yeah.
3 days in a row,
Yep.
and that's the way they've always done it. That's the way they still do it. And I'm in your boat on those quarterfinal Thursdays, calling 4 games on the radio in the quarterfinals. I did that for several years, and it's kind of almost like something you have to psych yourself up for.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine doing. But then I just did the winners bracket. I go from 4 to 2 to 1 by Saturday. I'm like, I can take a breather all day. So I don't know. What's that like?
Man, I mean, doing the state tournaments is a gauntlet. It really, truly is. Specifically because we've just gotten done doing the NSIC tournament in Sioux Falls just before
wow.
that, the Summit League basketball tournament, and then you dive into doing girls basketball, like you said, 12 games in 3 days, and then 7 days later you're doing 12 more boys games, and they're high energy. They mean everything to the kids and the families in the stands, and so
and people are watching.
Oh,
you know,
definitely.
people are watching.
Yep.
You can't
Yep.
sound like you're. And I've been guilty of this. I'll be honest, especially quarterfinal games that get. There's bad basketball sometimes, or there's blowouts, and if it's a blowout, it's like the 4th game of the day, and it's a blowout, and you're just like, I've listened back to my own stuff. I'm like, well, I can tell I was irritable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And it's really difficult to keep up that energy and that positive energy. But I'm guessing you, just being who you are very good at that.
I mean, for me, if I'm doing a sporting event, I'm excited anyways.
Yes.
There's that natural anxiety that comes with, oh my gosh, do I have all my notes right?
Of course.
Is there anything I'm forgetting? Is my mic going to work when we hit play and go? That kind of thing. But honestly, I rely heavily, especially at those state tournaments, on my broadcast partner, Steve Toom. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to South Dakota athletics, and I kind of equate him similar to Craig Maddock and Mike Hendrickson in that way. If you bring up a name, a year, a town, he's got 5 minutes worth of stories that he can tell that is interesting. It's got relevance to what's going on, and he's a really good play-by-play guy too. And so having somebody like that who can be by my side to kind of take some of that weight off my shoulders. There's been years where he's been sick to the point where his voice isn't working and can't get out in the air, and I just carry the weight more. Same thing with me.
Sure.
I've had years where I can barely get a word out when the morning starts, and so he takes over, and we've just done a really good job of being able to balance that over the years and work well together.
I mean, again, for most people know this, but some people are new and they don't. In South Dakota Public Broadcasting, there's 3 classes of high school basketball, and there's 3 different channels of SDPB, and now streaming is everywhere. So every single game, including consolation bracket games, every single game of the state tournament is televised, broadcasted, and the same people do those games day after day in the sites that they're at. Because, of course, in South Dakota, you're at 3 different sites all at the same time. Class A is here, Class AA is here, and Class B is there. And how long has Steve been your partner?
So he pretty much every year, without the exception of maybe a couple tournaments where they had to split us up because they needed 2 play-by-play guys, that kind of thing. But really, just about, I think of the 16 boys tournaments I've done, he and I have done 14 of them together, I'm pretty sure. So
wow.
Yeah.
I want you to take me back to 2010. I think you said that was your first. One state basketball, and I just happened to kind of started to get to know you back then, and so we were kind of like in the same hotel, and And I was doing the games on the radio. You were doing them on SDPB. So actually, I remember just being around your first. What was that like for you? Because I'm sure, again, high school sports were a big deal in Sioux Falls. They were a big deal to you growing up. This is what you wanted to do. And at the age of, 21, 20?
Yep, 21.
You're now calling state tournament games on statewide TV.
Yeah.
Well, I mean...
It was intimidating, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think at the time I kind of had just this I need to get through it kind of mentality. Like, I'm going to do it. We'll see how it goes. If it sucks, I'll figure it out and move on to the next thing. If it's great, okay.
Yeah.
And I just kind of went in and said, I'm going to trust my knowledge of these teams that I've followed and gotten to know. I'm going to lean on my broadcast partner. I'm going to take as many notes into the games as I can.
Now, were these double A's?
Yeah, my first one was double A.
That had to help.
Oh, it helped a lot.
Because obviously you're a Sioux Falls kid. You went to a double A school, so you know these schools.
And then you have to separate yourself, too, because there are still some kids on the team that you knew either in middle school or you were growing up with, that kind of thing. And there were coaches that were literally your gym teachers, that kind of deal. And so it's like, okay, you have to keep your personal life out of the broadcast and just call the game as much as you can. I was telling Cordell earlier, I listened to some old audio from even back in 2008 when I was with the Moondogs, and just hearing my voice, how different it was, the way I kind of had a cadence throughout the game, it was excruciating. It was one of those things where I could barely get through listening to it. And so, I mean, I'm sure at the time I was really proud of it, really, like, here we go kind of thing, but going back and listening to some of that old stuff is hard.
I am mortified to ever listen to anything I did that early in my career, and I'm the exact same way. I thought at the time, hey, I'm pretty good, and people are telling you like, oh, you sounded great. I mean, people are nice to your face, but but I'm sure maybe I encountered this the other day with somebody who came up and somebody's been listening to me for a long time. And I think he meant my play-by-play, but he said, you've improved a lot. You can take that one, that one of two ways and probably somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
But, so how did you get better?
Man, I mean, honestly, it's repetition, right? Like they say, if you want to get better at something or to become an expert, you have to do something 10,000 times or whatever. Yeah. Honestly, working in the Northwoods League, working with the Mankato Moondogs, spending 5 years
doing it every day.
You do it every single day. It's not like in football where, okay, you call a game, now you've got a week to sit over it, think about it, critique things, and then try it again.
Yeah.
You screw something up or you say something wrong tonight, you're going to fix it for tomorrow to make sure that you're better by the time Tuesday rolls around.
Yeah.
But baseball gives you an opportunity to call 100 games, 120 games, whatever it is, and then do it again the next season. So there's opportunity to work on yourself, correct yourself. And really, again, it was reaching out to people like Craig Maddox saying, hey, listen to this. And he'd say, hey, turn up your crowd noise. Make sure that people can hear the audio from the ballpark. Make sure they can feel like they're there and that they're not listening to a guy talking in a closet or something like that. Those little things, once you hear that from somebody else, clicks, and all of a sudden your broadcast gets better. Not necessarily because of the things you're doing, but because of the ambiance that you create with it, or the little details that you add in just to make it a little bit bigger and better. Those are things you just trial and error, you have to learn, but listening to the people who've done it and been there before you, it helps a lot too.
We could all learn a lot from a lot of people who came before us that did it really well. Craig's very good at, and he'd be minimalizing his voice and just letting the crowd and the action do the talking. Yep. So you've mentioned the Moondogs and 5 years of that, and eventually your love of baseball in general, and then the Sioux Falls Canaries came a calling.
Yep.
So 2014.
Yeah, 2014.
So how did this happen, and what was that like for a kid who's a huge baseball fan? I'm guessing went to a lot of Canaries games when you were a kid.
Well, I'd kind of heard when that the Canaries radio guy was leaving. He had gotten a job at Notre Dame, and so he was going to go.
Notre Dame?
I'm pretty sure that the guy that was before me had gotten a job there to kind of help out with some Notre Dame stuff.
Scott Beatty, right?
Yep.
Scott Beatty.
Yep. And then I think he's doing stuff with NBC Sports now and helping out with the Olympics. And
I know he was in Illinois,
so,
and I think that's his alma mater, doing a lot of stuff for the University of Illinois for several years. But anyway, so he got an opportunity. The job's open.
Yep. So the job's open, and my time with SDSU was kind of winding down. I realized I was wanting something different, and so I said, okay, I'm going to see what's in my hometown. The Canaries opportunity came up. I jumped on it, and they were nice enough to let me go through the whole interviewing process, and then I think throughout that they kind of realized that I might have a chance to be the guy. And as far as Mike Hendrickson told me, I think I was the only Sioux Falls native to ever get the radio job as the Canaries radio guy. So
Sure.
it was a badge of honor thing for me. Like I wanted to be that guy. I'd grown up watching games in that ballpark. I wanted a chance to kind of prove myself at the professional level and see if I could do it. So it was a really cool opportunity, and getting to have Steve Shirley, a former major leaguer, be the manager the first year, Ben Moore, who's a legend as a pitcher on that team, and Mike Myers was the pitching coach at the time on that squad too. So I got to be around some guys that had seen some things in baseball, been just about everywhere you could be in baseball. And again, it was a crash course, man. You wake up and realize that this isn't college sports anymore. You're dealing with people who are going to be more blunt. You're dealing with people who maybe aren't going to be as nice on a daily basis. And you have to learn to have a little bit of thicker skin because of that.
And these are guys you're traveling with sometimes.
Every single day. You just have to understand that they're professionals trying to keep their careers alive.
Yes.
It's not a college kid that's going to have another 3 years to figure things out.
Yeah.
These guys got today, and if it doesn't work, they may be going
There's
home.
no doubt about that. Like Mike Meyer as a person, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. If you run into him during a game or right after a game, might be a different story sometimes, depending on how that game went. And Steve Shirley was very much like that. Again, for those of you new to the Sioux Falls sports scene, Steve Shirley was the manager of the Canaries for several years, beginning circa 2007. They had been basically, you would know this as much as anybody, a laughing stock or a losing team for their first 15 years of existence. He brought in Mike, who's still the manager and managed them all the way to the championship series last year. Mike was a young guy who had just gotten done pitching in that league for St. Paul, and together they almost instantly turned the Canaries around. And in 2008, Steve's second or third year, they won their only championship they've won, and they continued to remain one of the best teams in the league for the next couple of years after that, including those. We don't talk about those Pheasants years when they were the Sioux Falls Pheasants. And so anyway, Steve was the easiest way I can explain him is Lou Brown.
100%.
Looks like Lou Brown from Major League. And, but you were around him a lot more than I ever was. Would you say that's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was just like a cut-of-the-earth kind of guy. I think he had farmland or something like that out in Montana or something.
New Mexico.
New Mexico, that's what it was, exactly.
That's where he spent the off-season.
Yep, he would be in New Mexico, and, man, by the end, Mike was kind of running the ship, but Steve still, he had his fingerprints all over that thing, and he had just kind of this gruff kind of attitude to him. Hardly ever saw him smile, but when he cracked a joke, he would laugh and bellow louder than anybody else. But that dude
But I'm
was
guessing
intense.
when you're talking about, you had a lot of players to deal with as well, and again, they're on the edge all the time about their careers, but you probably earned some spurs, cut some chops, or cut your teeth by dealing with Steve Shirley. I'm guessing.
Yeah, coaches in general, even if it's not the manager or Steve Shirley or somebody like that, sometimes they put their assistant coaches in front of you just so he doesn't have to deal with you. That kind of thing. It really was an education on how to deal with people on a daily basis. Whether it be just, they're having a bad day, how do you navigate around that or what? But you got to get your interviews, you got to get your lineup cards, and so you have a job to do, and you don't always want to get in their way, but sometimes you have to.
Well, yeah, you do. They might not be in a good mood, and they might not be excited to see you, and vice versa.
If you said something that wasn't maybe the kindest on the air the
they'd
night
hear
before,
about it?
they would hear about it, and
Wow.
they'd be the first to talk to you the next day.
Oh, boy.
Okay,
do you have a memory of that?
Well, not a specific one, but there were times where there'd be a pitcher who was obviously struggling, command issues, whatever, and I would be blunt and say, hey, you really was struggling tonight. This is a trend, and I would give stats to back it up kind of thing.
Sure.
Almost immediately after the game, I would either get a phone call or the next morning come in my office, that kind of deal, and we would talk about it, and I would have to defend my
Would Steve
reasoning.
sit you down with the player?
No, it was usually just me and
Steve.
Steve, and he'd be sitting there, just kind of like, we talked about this, that kind of thing.
But would you hold your ground and be like, Steve, I've got to, this is my job?
And I think he understood that, but he was one of those guys that was very much a player's manager.
Yeah.
He was going to go to bat and fight for his guys no matter what, even if it was a small thing. He wanted to have their back, and I respected that.
Now, that was your first year, and then you had 2 or 3 more after that, right?
I was there for 4 years. So I had
And they
Chris
were
Patterson for a year, and then Mike Meyer.
And then Mike Meyer. They were terrible the whole time, weren't they?
They were awful.
So, how was that for you? Was it was it deflating, or were you just like, I get to call baseball? I'm sure it was a lot of both.
Yeah, 60% of it was like, man, I get to call baseball. I get to see the St. Paul Saints. I get to go to Chicago. I get to go to Winnipeg. I get to go to Kansas City and see the Monarchs.
And sometimes you get to enjoy yourself in these towns?
Yeah,
Good.
you get to have plenty of fun when you go out and you get to be around the players and all that. And so there was a lot of good that came with it. But I go from being with the Mankato Moondogs, who are a playoff team every year or in the championship every year, South Dakota State women, who are going to NCAA tournaments, going to WNIT Sweet 16s, things like that. Then going to the Canaries, it was learning how to still be a good broadcaster even through the dog days.
Yeah,
one of our fans told us, you're really good at polishing a turd. And it's like, okay, I get that. I get where you're coming from, but like they weren't that bad. There were days where, we had Jason Repko, a former major leaguer, on that roster, I think in 2015, 16. We had other major leaguers that were there. There were guys that were moving up the ranks and getting into affiliated baseball. They just didn't have the financial flexibility to go get the big name players.
Right.
And it hurt that the St. Paul Saints were there at the time too. Every player that got into independent baseball wanted to go play for the St. Paul Saints. They had a brand new stadium. They were the cream of the crop. They put on a great show every
they had
night.
the budget. They had the budget to have all the bells and whistles, both from buildings to people and manpower at their games, for sure, to the point where they're now the Twins AAA affiliate, and not just because they're right there. That helps, but they've been such a and I will just as a footnote to all that. Mike Meyer, your last year was his first. And it was tough sledding, but the Canaries eventually got new owners who invested, and long story short, they've had 3 playoff years in a row. Mike was always a good manager.
Yes.
He just needed the resources to bring in the best possible players. And now with St. Paul out of the league, Sioux Falls is, I'm not going to say they're the place, but they're definitely a place that players want to come play.
Absolutely.
He's a guy they want to play for in this league, and it took him several years to build that up. And
if you're a pitcher in independent baseball, or a guy who's finding himself on the outside of minor league baseball trying to find a way back in, Mike Meyer can fix you. I think that the perfect example of this is a guy who just pitched against the Twins the other night, John Brebbia. He was with the Sioux Falls Canaries in 2015. He was actually a Mankato Moondog too, so I knew him from back before that. But guy that had gotten drafted by the New York Yankees, worked up through their system, but there's only so far you can go in the Yankees system. You're either going to be a superstar, or you're going to get traded, or you're going to get cut. There's just not really a lot of room in that system to really grow and prosper. So he was a young guy that got cut and didn't have a team. Mike got his hands on him and was his pitching coach for a year in Sioux Falls, I believe. Either way, he had really good success here, and then he followed Mike down to Laredo for a year when he was with the Lemurs, and they won a championship there. Wow. Long story short, John Brebbia ends up getting signed by the Cardinals because of his success working with Mike Myers, ends up making it to the major leagues, and has had a career in the majors now for, I think, 8 years. He was in the Twins minor league system for a little bit this last year, but he finally got back with the Colorado Rockies, threw 3 straight batters, threw a shutout inning against the Twins the other night.
Oh, wow.
So pretty cool to see guys that came through the system, learn from a guy like Mike Myers, and take what they've learned from Mike and push it to the next level. So
you explained a little gap there because he was with Steve Shirley for Steve's 8 seasons here. And then once Steve was fired, Mike wanted to be the manager, but they wouldn't hire the guy that was with Steve, so he was sent packing, and he lashed down in Laredo, Texas, where, as you mentioned, they won a title. I'm sure he wasn't a small part of that. And then he gets hired, I think, 2 managers later. A couple guys were there for only a year, and then he was the guy, and has been ever since. Okay, I got to tell one great Steve Shirley story. Have you heard this? I don't know if you know it's coming, but just in case anyone hasn't heard it, or if you forget it, it's like the all-time Steve Shirley story. Manager of this was back in the Pheasants days, 2011, 2012, something like that. I had just gotten done doing my 3 to 6 p.m. radio show on KWSN. I had decided that night, it's a nice night, I'll go over and watch a Canaries game. I'm wrapping everything up. The game has already started. I'm still at the station. And on my drive there, I'm listening to Steve Shirley being tossed out of the game in the first inning. Shirley is irate. Shirley is going, he's letting him have it. First inning, Steve Shirley is out of the game. And by the way, Brazil just scored a goal to go up 2-1 in the final minute or 2 of the game. So, that doesn't happen in soccer nor the World Cup that often. So that's why they're going crazy.
Go Brazil.
Steve, anyway, I get to the ballpark, so I've listened to Steve Shirley getting tossed. I go straight to the right field tiki bar, imagine that, and and I'm meeting a friend or two, and and I order a drink, and I turn around, and the first person I see as I turn around is Steve Shirley. And this is the manager of the Canaries. He's now got a Hawaiian shirt on. He's got a stogie in his hand, in one hand, and a beer in the other. And a co-ed by his side.
Of course.
And she is someone he knew or had been dating in New Mexico. And she was up there to come visit him, and just maybe because he's a manager, he wanted a little more quality time.
Start the off.
I don't know if it was a coincidence that he got thrown out of the game in the first inning, and he could. And I was kind of worried, like he knew who I was because I had interviewed him a couple times, and I was kind of worried that like I caught him, or like I might. Obviously, I was going to tell people. It's still a great story to tell.
Steve did not care.
He did not care.
No.
He was having a good time.
Yes, he was.